Hey guys, Lee with LG Speed and Custom here, and in this video we are working on the legendary Purple People Eater. So the Purple People Eater is a legendary Vancouver, BC custom. It was bought brand new in 1956 by Ron Foss, and a year later, him and his wife allegedly drove the car down to California and had Bears Customs go through it for them. Some of the things that happened was these quarter panels have been extended 20 inches. It's got the Merc reveal on both sides. 56 Packard taillights were put in. Currently has 55 Pontiac bumpers on it now. However, that's not the way it was originally built. Aside from the extended quarter panels, it's had some scoops put in the front of the quarter panels here. Chopped with a Carson top. Super cool piece here. I don't know if anything was done with the front. The front sheet metal is currently not on the car, and I haven't seen it. Nor have I seen any photos of the front of the car, so I can't comment on that for sure. My friend Ross Galitsky owns this car now. He bought it about 5 years ago. He's been trying to buy this car since he was 15 years old. He finally has it. Unfortunately, it's pretty far gone from what he originally wanted when he was 15 years old and saw it. But he's doing his best to restore it and recreate it to what it was. So, what are we doing to it? Well, as you just saw in the photos of when this car was still in its prime, it sat really, really low. As you can see, it is nowhere near that height now. I think Ross put it on a newer, or not a newer chassis, but another 56 Mercury chassis, I think. Either way, it does not have the lowering blocks in it that it used to have. And as you look underneath, you can see it had some monster lowering blocks in it at one time. So Ross wants the car to sit that low again, but he doesn't want to do lowering blocks. He wants to kind of modernize the suspension a little bit underneath, just in the back, just to make it more comfortable and user-friendly and easy to drive. Ross drives his cars a lot. So we're going to be building a, from scratch, 4-link system to go in the back of this with airbags. We're only putting airbags on the back. Up front, we're just going to tried and true, cut 1.5 coils. Works perfect every single time. And Ross just wants the car to be as low as it was back in the day, but be able to lift it up when he needs to get in and out of tight parking lots, or if you got to work on the car, a little bit better ride. So yeah, that's what we're going to do in this video. We'll lift the car up in the air, get underneath, start making some measurements.
Okay, so we're up in the air. Before we do any suspension stuff, we got to build a transmission mount in here. So this car, at some point in its life, someone pulled the 312 out and put a 390 with a C6 in it. Ross has since put another 312 with a Merc-O-Matic back in, but the transmission mount has been modified for the C6 and he does not have a rubber. So I just went and picked up, this is just like a GM style transmission mount. I use these all the time. And, you know, yes, this does not fit the Merc-O-Matic transmission, but I can make it fit. All we're gonna do is make a like 3/16 plate that has this bolt pattern. These are 6 inches center to center. We'll make a plate and then weld that plate to this so that this will bolt in place, and then we can probably Might even be able to just drill a hole in here. Obviously cut this piece off. I don't know what this is all about, but we can get rid of that and just drill a hole in here, and boom, we're done. So let's, before we do anything, let's pull this piece out. It's just got 4 bolts in here. Man, look how beefy this convertible X member is. That's like 3/8 plate. Heavy duty stuff. So yeah, we'll pull this out, cut this stuff off, make our new plate, bolt it together, and then line this up and drill a hole in the appropriate spot. I've got the transmission cross member unbolted and sitting on the floor here. And with that removed, I'm thinking rather than like make a plate and weld it to this mount, I could probably just drill and tap this mount in, or drill and tap this to fit this mount, because this little aluminum pad is like 3/4 of an inch thick, so that's plenty of meat to drill and tap into. And then we don't need to make any adapters. I found the center line here, then measured where this piece needs to sit, marked it out. So we'll drill some holes, tap it, bolt our mount on. So if you're wondering how I knew how deep to drill, I took my calipers and I measured from the base to the actual tail shaft on the transmission, figured out how deep that is, and then I transferred that onto the drill and used some tape to make a mark, and I just drilled until my tape started touching, and there we go. Now I know how deep we are. I drilled that out to 3/8 and then tapped it to a 7/16. Boom, done. So there's a little spacer that goes up in there. It's actually not a spacer, it's for preloading the bushing, whatever that means. I don't know, it says in the instructions to use it, so it's in there. Transmission mount is mounted to the transmission. Now we just got to figure out how to mount this to the cross member. So I've mocked our cross member back up in here. It just about fits right there, other than right back here we've got, like if we drilled new holes, we got to know where to drill a hole here. So I think I'm gonna just cut this big guy off. There's like a big plate welded on the top of that. We'll just cut that off, put the cross member back where it is, and build a new outright to fit properly. I bolted the cross member back in, and as you can see, our mount like lines up really nice with it. Basically, we just got to build a little like half round bracket with a hole drilled in it that's going to weld to here. So I've measured side to side, and we got our transmission dead center in there. So if we measure from here, from the end to here, if we start our hole at 7/8 of an inch and end it at 3/8 of an inch, that should be just great. And we are 2 3/8 wide. You know what, we'll just make it 3 inches wide. All right, let's go draw this up on the computer. Cut this out at 3/16. Look at that. It's perfect. Boom. Let's drag the welder under here. Actually, we'll tighten this right up so that it's on the exact same angle as this. I thought I had the 5/8 under here still from when I did these up, but maybe not. I just threw a couple tacks on this. We'll pull it off and weld it up on the bench. I don't want to weld it underneath here because this rubber is just going to catch on fire. Here we have it, all painted, put back in. Let's take our bottle jack out here and see what happens. Okay, there we go. Bottle jack's out. Transmission did not fall on the ground. Success. So now that we've got the engine and transmission established, we can base our pinion angle for the rear end off of this angle. Next step, let's undo these U-bolts. And we're going to, remember when we did Steve Chase's 50 Meteor, I tack welded those little saddles in there that the rear end sat in? I think that's going to be our next step here. I've taken the fender skirts and the rear tires off, and from there I was able to use a square and find the center of our axle, make a mark on the floor. I did the same up front. I used a square off the center of the hub, made a mark on the floor, measured it on both sides, and we're 119.25 wheelbase. So based off that, I know the axle is centered in there right now, which is a good thing. Just pulled what's left of these bump stops off. This one's not too bad. The one on the other side was just absolutely mutilated. Nothing left. I gotta say, it was sure nice of Ross to have the whole underside of this car sandblasted before he brought it over. They just threw some black primer or black paint on there just so it doesn't flash rust, but it's all nice and clean. Along with the bump stops, I've also taken the drive shaft out and removed the old shocks. I pretty much had to cut them off. They're not gonna work for this application anymore anyways, so into the scrap bin. Now that I know what like the wheelbase was at ride height, I have relocated the jack stands. I've got two just ahead of the leaf spring points. Actually, they're quite a ways ahead. I moved them far enough ahead so that the area where we're gonna be mounting the front of the four-link won't be, like these won't be in the way. And as well, I have put some big guys at the back just so that the frame doesn't flex with all this hanging off the back. We're gonna blast some U-bolts apart, separate the rear end from the leaf springs. We can probably pull the leaf springs right out. They're gone now. I did double check our wheelbase with the suspension hanging, and the axle moved forward like an inch. So that's why I wanted to do it at ride height. So from here, we'll take the leaf springs out, separate our rear end, and then we will cut those fixtures out that I was telling you about that will get tack welded in here, and that's basically going to locate our rear end for ride height. Okay, so other than our e-brake cables and our brake hose, our rear end is completely separated from the car. So now we're gonna go over to the plasma table and we'll cut out the axle relocation fixture, quickly weld that together on the bench, and then set that on the axle, lift the axle. They'll get set on here, and then we'll lift the axle up until it touches the frame, and then we'll tack it to the frame. So we're gonna cut 4 of these out of 3/16 plate. Okay, these are all made up. These are just tacked. I didn't fully weld them because they're just a temporary thing. They will get cut out when we're done. But this sits on the axle just like that. And then this end here, we're gonna use a floor jack and lift the axle up. Probably somewhere, let me get my light situated here. So here's where the original bump stops used to sit. So I would guess, I would assume that that's probably where the center of the axle should be. So if we tack those to the frame right about there and have the horseshoe end tacked to the rear end, what that's gonna do is hold our rear end in place where we want it, and then we can build our suspension from there. So we won't tack anything until we get it up in there and mocked up, and just using the floor jack to hold it up there, we'll measure the wheelbase and make sure that we're still at our 119 1/4. As well, we gotta set the pinion angle at the same time. So we'll get our wheelbase, then get our pinion angle, and when that all checks out, we'll throw 4 tacks up there on the frame and 4 tacks on there to hold this in place. So I've put a lot of floor lengths in cars, done a lot of rear suspension work, and in the past, it's always been really hard to lift the rear end all the way up there with the floor jack, even with this little spacer. And today, we're gonna fix that. I used to always stack blocks, and you get it all the way up there, and then you go to like twist it to set the pinion angle, and the blocks would fall, and the whole thing would come crashing down, and you'd have to start all over again. But not no more. I just cut 2 of these guys out. We're gonna weld this to that scrap of 2x3 tubing right there. Drill a hole in it so that it bolts to the floor jack. And bam, we're gonna make ourselves a little floor jack attachment that will lift the rear end up. So up front here, I think I want to build a little outrigger coming out with maybe some sort of threaded piece that we can thread up and down, and that way we can adjust our pinion angle with this as well. Bam, there we go. I welded a 5-inch piece of tubing on there with a 5/8 bolt on the end, and then you can thread the bolt up and down to adjust your pinion angle. I think I might change this out for just a piece of 5/8 ready rod or all thread, because then it's a lot more adjustable and we can actually put like a nice plate on the end. But I don't have any right now, and it's 5 o'clock, so I'm not going to get any right now. But, you know, that'll work for, you know, getting it gives you the idea. Boom, there we go. We're up. Okay, so I've got our rear end lifted up into place, and I've got our wheelbase sitting where we need it to be. I've just got a plumb bob running through our axle center line to those marks that we made on the floor, as well as I have measured from our axle tube to the original leaf spring perch. And we are exactly the same on both sides, and our marks line up. So what I'm gonna do is tack these to the frame. So our rear end is still not centered left to right. We're about 1 inch out. But if I tack these to the frame, they will stay put, and then we can slide the rear end over in here until we're centered left to right. We'll set our pinion angle and then tack these guys to the rear end housing, and that will lock our rear end in place at ride height with our pinion angle, and from there we can build our suspension off of it. Note that our axle fixture that we made is not sitting where the bump stop was. I originally put it there, and we were about 1 inch too far forward off our wheelbase. So you can use those as a like rough guide to get you in the ballpark, but don't trust them. I've got 2 tacks on each side of our little saddles, and with those tacked in place, I was able to scooch the rear end over and get it centered. Like our distance from our frame rail to our backing plate is the same on each side, so I know the rear end is centered in there. Before we tack these, however, to hold the rear end in place, we need to set our pinion angle, which is really easy. A lot of people, they get super confused with pinion angle, but it's really simple. So the first thing you gotta do is we need to come to the front of the vehicle. We're gonna put the straight edge across the front pulley, straight up and down. Put our angle finder on there, and we are sitting at 88.6 degrees pointing up. This is why we needed to do the transmission mount before we could do any suspension work, because we needed the engine and transmission in its permanent spot. So we'll take that 88.6 degrees straight up. We're gonna go to our pinion, and we need to set that, holy crap, we were really close. We were at 88.6 on the engine, we're at 88.8 on here. So I'm gonna turn this bolt down, maybe like half a thread. Let's try that. $89.6. Oh, we gotta go up a little bit actually. So we'll thread it up ever so slightly. 88.6. We'll flash it in between 5 and 6. Boom. There we go. All you need is that this angle here matches the angle of your engine. That is it. That's all that is required for pinion angle. As long as those guys match, you won't have any driveline vibration. All right, with our pinion angle set and we're good side to side, let's tack these guys down here. And then our rear end should stay in place and we can pull the jack out. We're just tacking this. We're not fully welding it because we got to remove it once we're done building our suspension. Everything's all tacked in place. This tool rules. Well, with our rear end just hanging out here, I guess we can start building some 4-link brackets. Just loaded a sheet of 3/16 plate up onto the plasma table. I've got all the old drawings and schematics and stuff from when we did this in Steve Chase's 50 Meteor, so we're just gonna duplicate it. We've got our 4-link bits for the axle all cut out. So we're going to weld these together with this little pad that goes on here, and that's what the airbag is going to sit on. The end of our 4-link is going to have rod ends such as this, and they're going to go in between just like that. So what I've done is, you see this like little sleeve in there, that little bushing? Using a bushing driver, I have pushed those out, and now we can use these as spacers. Let me grab a bolt here. So if we take our bolt, oh, I might have to ream that guy out a little bit. Well, that's embarrassing. Okay, I gotta ream these holes out a little bit. My bolt won't fit through. Okay, this bolt fits through. We'll use this one. They're tight. That guy will go in there. That'll go like that. And then we can just snug a nut up on there. And what that's going to do is hold our spacing correct for when we weld that up. On this end here, these airbag plates, I've made these little top and bottom pieces are designed to sit in there, just like that. So we'll fit that like that and weld them together. From there, we can take our finished piece and put it up on the axle, and it will eventually get welded to the axle when we get to that point. Of course, it fits perfect through the one that I didn't grab for the example. We've done some reaming and some rocking. We've got these guys bolted together with our spacers in here. I've got this plate mocked up, ready to weld. This one soon to be ready to weld. Let's fire up the TIG and make some action happen. Those guys are all welded up. While we wait for those to cool down, let's go and cut out the front part of the 4-link, the part that attaches to the frame. We've got these guys all cut out, and I've mocked it up with the ends in here. These ones I put back together. I took those bushings out and put them in. Took the bushings out of that we were using as spacers and put them back in our ends, bolted it back together. This end here, I did the same thing, except for these ones. See this little notch in here? That means these are left-hand thread. So now we can start figuring out our 4-link bars. We'll probably go underneath the car and kind of mock this end up, see where this end fits nice in the frame, and then get our measurement. The reason I've got left-hand thread ones on here, this is one of my pet peeves when you buy like the store-bought 4-links, is they're usually right-hand thread on both ends. And the problem with that is when you need to adjust this, you have to like physically take it apart, turn the end out, put it back together, and then measure it and try it. With a left-hand thread and a right-hand thread, you can simply back the jam nuts off and thread the bar one way and it gets wider, thread the bar the other way and it gets closer. The same as like a drag link or a tie rod. Makes adjusting it so much easier. So that's the way I like them, a left-hand thread and a right-hand thread, to make it adjustable without having to take everything apart.
So I've been trying a couple different variations under here, and I think we want to be like somewhere in this area right here. However, we've got this bracket here is in our way, and this brake line tab bracket is in our way. This is huge. This is like probably 5 inches away from the frame, which is, it doesn't need to be there at all. In fact, this hose could probably like run up in that hole there and then just run this brake line that way instead. So I think I'm going to take this out, and I think I'm going to take this bracket out because this is also like 3 inches away from the frame, and this can go anywhere. This is just the emergency brake line, so we can figure out a plan B for that. We'll get it out of the way and get our 4-link kind of situated first, and then we'll come back and mount this in a place where it's not going to interfere. Unbelievable. So when it's a brake line that you're trying to save, obviously it never comes apart nice, but when it's an old brake line that you know is going to get replaced, it comes apart just fine.
With those brackets and brake lines out of the way, I was able to get a couple measurements and came up with this. So this is kind of where our frame rail sits. So this is gonna weld onto the frame rail there and stick out. And then our 4-link mounts are gonna weld on there and there. I think I'm gonna cut one out and we'll try it and see.
Those little notches line up like that. This sits on there like that. And then fits on there like that. I've went ahead and cut a second one out. I've got them both mocked up on the bench. I did the same as before. I pushed the inserts out of here and have them bolted in there to keep our spacing. We've got a 1/8 inch in here. That way we get a nice little valley to fill with weld, like so. So let's weld these up, and then once they're both welded up, we can start fitting them to the frame. With these all welded up, I've put the rod ends back together, and I've got them mocked up under the car here. I've got just a scrap piece vice grip to them right now, and all that is just to keep them on the same plane so that they're like level this way. I still have to level them up this way as well as this way, I'm gonna work on that right now, and once I get that established, we'll tack them in place. Okay, these are tacked in place. We are 90 degrees this way. We are 90 degrees this way. I took a measurement from here all the way back to here. We're the same on both sides. I've cross-measured it from here to our X member X on both sides, and we're good that way. And I've taken this big straight edge here with the angle finder on it and went across the bottom, and we're perfect. So this part is tacked in place now. I think I might weld the front up, then we can pull this off and build some gussets on the back. I think I'm gonna try to tie it right into this big heavy duty 3/8 X member. So I got a couple good tacks on the backside here to hold it from pulling this way when we go to weld it up. So we should be okay. These are all welded in place on the front side, and I went to go weld the back side, and I can't get this guy out because this X frame tapers this way, so it's like stuck in there. I'll have to cut it out. I sawzalled our bar out of there, got it out of the way, and then I went ahead and welded the back sides on these, and now I've made some little templates for some gussets that are gonna go from here. This is probably, I don't know, about 6 inches or so forward, and they're triangulated, and they're gonna weld into the original frame rail, as well as tie into this X member, and then come right to the end on here. Not at the top one here, because the top is radiused, so, but it'll come to the top of the radius there. So let's cut those out and weld them in, and then these guys should be nice and beefy. Yeah, those guys are all welded up. Went pretty well. There's a couple spots where I ran into some of the original like Mercury factory welds where my welder didn't like it, but we made it work. They're on there. They're not going to fall off. I'm confident in it. I've got this guy mocked up here, and we're going to try to hold it at, where is 0 on here? Right there. About there. So I'm gonna set the camera down so I can use my other hand and get a tape measurement from the center of this bolt to the center of this bolt, and then we can cut our 4-link bars. This is 1-inch DOM tubing, 3/16 wall, which will give us plenty of meat and is the correct inside diameter to thread that to this 3/4 inch by 16 thread. Our center to center measurement from underneath, from the center of our bolt to the center of our bolt, is 21 1/4. So I've got these mocked up at our 21 1/4. Now these threaded shanks are 2 inches.
So I would like the bar to at least be 1 inch in. So what I've done is measured 1 inch in on both sides and made a mark and made another mark, and then I measured that distance, and it's 17 5/8. So if we cut 4 bars at 17 5/8, thread one end for left-hand thread, on the other for right-hand thread, we'll have our 4-link bars. Our 4-link bars are made. Man, I really got to get a lathe. Being a human lathe is exhausting. We're gonna hook these back up to our brackets that are welded to the frame, and then we'll bolt this end back in these guys and see how they line up. Driver's side worked out great. Our axle bracket's sitting on the axle. It's nice and happy. We got to trim the trunk floor a little bit. This side, however, gets a little weird. We got to trim the spare tire well, which I'm going to talk to Ross to make sure it's okay to do that. Hopefully it is, because we kind of have to. And it's crunched pretty bad. This car needs quite a bit of sheet metal repair. As you can see, it got left outside for many years, and the Carson top disintegrated, and it kind of just turned into a big bathtub. So I'm not doing the sheet metal work on it. I'm not sure who's going to be doing that. I'm just doing the suspension. So I'll quickly talk to Ross and get the okay to cut this out, and we'll continue on. Ross said just rip it right out. So it was only like spot welded in a couple spots. I think this is, I don't know if it's homemade or but somebody put it in. So yeah, I'm just trying to wedge it out. Floor jack. With this spare wheel well out of the way, got this guy sitting in place. I've traced the axle where we got to weld it so I can drop them down. We'll clean the paint off there. This side, I also marked where we got to cut this. I think we might just cut this whole panel right along this seam here. So this piece here, that's not factory. Somebody's cut that and made that piece to go in there. And up top here, like you see how we got all these body lines here? You go up top here and we've got a flat floor. Somebody put a piece over top. So I don't know why, but anyways, whatever. I think if we cut this right along this body line here, our gas tank straps will still be okay. And then we'll make basically, the same as this piece here. But instead of it ending here, it will end back here in line with this. And then we'll have enough room for our airbags to sit up in there. Another thing I could have done is instead of using these, we could have just built a normal 4-link mount and then built a separate airbag mount and put the airbag like right here. I think that's what we did on Steve Tilley's 59 Ford, and that worked okay. However, I like figured out how much time it would take to like redesign all that versus just cut this out and use what I already know works, and I think it's probably less labor to just stick with this and move the trunk floor riser back a little bit.
Check this out. This is why I like using these parallel 4-link systems. 0.3 degrees, let's go up. 0.3, 0.3, 0.3, 0.3. And what that means is as the suspension goes up and down, your pinion angle is not going to move. Your pinion angle stays the same. Our paint's all cleared off. We are at 0.1 that way, which is pretty close. And then this way we are 89 or 90. We're at 90 right there. We are 32 and a half from here to here, 32 and a half from there to there, 35 and an eighth, and 35 and an eighth, meaning we're square. Let's throw some tack welds on here. Four-link done. There we go. Our 4-link is more or less done. Obviously, these are just tacked. We'll drop the rear end out when we're done everything, and then we can weld all that stuff up. But it's in place. Boom, there we go. I'm super happy with how it turned out. So there's a couple things left to do. We still need to build, we've got our lower airbag plates right here. We still got to build our upper airbag plates, which are going to tie into the frame rail, but like up in this area. We'll have to cut this out, build probably a bridge across that those will tie into, as well as shocks. We're going to have to build some shock mounts on that bridge that will tie into here. And we're going to need a panhard bar, because right now there's nothing stopping this going side to side. So panhard bar still has to be done. All that stuff though, we're gonna do that in the next video, because it is 5 o'clock and Shannon is loading the trailer right now, because tomorrow morning we're leaving to go to the Langley Loafers old time drags at Mission Raceway. However, by the time you guys watch this, that video will have already aired. But anyways, I don't want to work on this car anymore. I want to go racing. So we'll end this video here and continue on Monday when we get back. We'll start making the rest of this stuff happen. So thanks everybody for watching. If you want to support the channel, please check out lgspeedcustom.com. Get yourself some LG Speed and custom merch and parts. This 4-link brackets and stuff that we made. If you need any of that stuff cut off, shoot me an email at lgspeedcustom@gmail.com, and yeah, we can set you up with some of that stuff. So thanks again for watching. We'll see you on the next video. Bye, Ross.